This is Saturn, the sixth planet from the Sun, a Jovian planet or gas giant. It is the second largest in the solar system and is about 9 times the size of the Earth. The first observation of Saturn through a telescope was made by the famous Italian astronomer Galileo in 1610. His first telescope was so crude that he wasn't able to distinguish the planet's rings, and instead thought the planet might have ears or 2 large moons on either side of it. In 1655, Dutch astronomer Christian Huygens discovered a Saturn moon Titan. 4 other major moons of Saturn, Iapetus, Rhea, Tethys, and Dione, were discovered by Dominique Cassini, and the last 2 astronomers were namesakes of future spacecraft. Saturn moon discoveries continued through space exploration throughout the centuries. Up until last month, Saturn was in second in the galactic competition of moon count, having 62 known moons. On October 7th, a team of scientists discovered 20 new moons orbiting Saturn. Pictured shows the discovery of one such moon. You can see the highlighted point move relative to the background stars and galaxies between the 2 pictures. The 2 pictures were taken 1 hour apart, and you can see how far it travels. The detection of these moons was announced by Scott Shepard, David Jewett, and Jan Klena. As of October 7th this year, Saturn has retaken the galactic throne with a total of 82 discovered moons. Jupiter had previously held the title since about 2010 with 79 moons. I found an interesting correlation regarding the size of a planet and the amount of moons that have been identified. While Saturn and Jupiter have a relatively similar diameter, Uranus and Neptune are less than half their size. And as you can see, Saturn and Jupiter have way more moons identified than Uranus and Neptune. Currently, these are all the identified moons for the 4 Jovian planets, but these numbers could grow at any point. As the graph shows, the moon discoveries have really ramped up in recent history, compared to the few found here and there since the 1600s. This slide is a diagram of the 20 new discovered moons exclusively, without showing any of the previously discovered moons around Saturn. As we've learned, prograde is when the object spins the same direction as its orbit, and retrograde is the opposite of its orbit. In the picture, the red lines are the 17 retrograde moons that were discovered recently. These moons have a very eccentric orbit, and it takes them 3 years or more to go around Saturn. 3 of these moons, the new moons, orbit prograde. 2 of those 3 orbit in 2 years, and those are the blue lines. They're a little bit closer. 1 of those 3 has the same orbital period as the retrograde moons, and it takes equally long. And here are the guys that discovered the moons. Scott Shepard and colleagues have discovered over 70 of the regular moons around Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Shepard is an astronomer at the Department of Terrestrial Magnetism at the Carnegie Institution for Science in Washington, D.C. He has been involved in the discoveries of distant objects and moons since 1999. Over 104 moons across those 4 planets. He's led the discovery of the object with the most distant orbit in our solar system. He has 3 comets named after him. And then pictured is Scott Shepard, David Jewett, Jan Klena, and then Saturn with some moons. Scott Shepard says, using some of the largest telescopes in the world, we are now completing the inventory of small moons around the giant planets. They play a crucial role in helping us determine how our solar system's planets formed and evolved. For example, the newfound moon's existence suggests that the impacts that created them occurred after Saturn was fully formed. The reason we know this is because the gas giant Saturn had a disk of dust and gas surrounding it during its formation. If these moons are around during that period, they would have been traveling through this cloud and would have lost all their speed and eventually just spiraled down into Saturn and been destroyed. This discovery is a great insight into the formation of our own solar system, hinting that they were formed much like the moons of Saturn after the sun itself had fully formed. Otherwise, our solar system planets would have ended up crashing into a similar cloud of dust and debris around the sun and lost their speed and spiraled into the sun much like the moons of Saturn would. The Subaru telescope was used when discovering these moons. It got its name from the Japanese name for the open star cluster, Pleiades. When you hear Subaru, you might think of the car company, and if you look at the logo, you can kind of see why. There's a bit of a star cluster in their logo, which is something that I just learned doing this. The Subaru telescope construction completed in 1998, and it's located in Mauna Kea, Hawaii, 4139 meters above sea level. And as we've learned in class, being at a particularly high altitude is very beneficial for space observation. This telescope boasts an 8.3 meter diameter thermal expansion glass mirror. At its time of being built, it was the largest single piece mirror in the world, until 2005. This telescope was also used in identifying the farthest observed object in our solar system's orbit. In 2012, the name of this object is VP113, and it was nicknamed Biden. As you might see, several of the world's biggest telescopes are located in the same location as Subaru. Subaru's twin, Gemini North, the Keck telescope, and the 30-meter telescope are all at Mauna Kea, Hawaii. Also, looking through the picture, you can see that a lot of them say mountain, Mount Hopkins, some type of high point. Astronomers have come up with groups to put the irregular moons in to keep them the familiar moons are kept together. There's the Inuit group, and there's 7 prograde moons, which 2 of the new moons fit into this group. The Gallic group, there's only 4 moons, and they're prograde. 1 of the new one goes here. There's the Norse group, which consists of 46 retrograde moons, and 17 of the newfound moons fit in this group. And 1 of them is known as the farthest known moon in Saturn's orbit. The Inuit and Norse groups were likely formed when a larger moon broke apart during its orbit a long time ago, colliding with asteroids, comets, or other objects in Saturn's orbit. Many of these moons had parent moons that broke apart and continued to orbit Saturn. In the long horizontal picture, you can see Saturn with many of its moons mostly to scale. And the graph at the bottom shows the relative masses of these moons. As you can see, Titan is much larger than all of the moons combined, and it's just massive. Back in 2018, Shepard's team discovered 12 new moons orbiting Jupiter, and they had an event where you can try to name the moons yourself. They're having a similar one with this discovery of the 20 new moons around Saturn, and if you want to try to name one, you can send a tweet to @SaturnLunacy and try to get a moon named after yourself or something that you want to name it.